There's a mathematical equation that has destroyed every major civilization in human history. Not a theory, not a possibility, a certainty. And right now, in 2025, we're approaching the final term in that equation again. Here's what should terrify you. The pattern is always the same. The mechanism is always identical. And the ending never changes. Let me show you something that historians don't want to connect, something economists refuse to discuss in public, something that, once you see it, you'll notice everywhere in our current system. Rome, 64 AD, the imperial mint on the Capitoline Hill. If you stood in that building on a particular morning in autumn, you would have witnessed the exact moment an empire began its irreversible descent. A master minter holds a silver denarius in his calloused palm. It weighs 3.9 grams, pure silver. This coin built the greatest empire the world had ever seen. It paid the legions. It moved grain from Egypt to Gaul. It was the mathematical foundation of Roman power. But Emperor Nero has just issued new orders. The minter places the coin on one side of a bronze scale. On the other side, he begins adding new denarii, fresh from the imperial dies, still warm from striking. These new coins are lighter, just slightly. 3.7 grams instead of 3.9. The silver content, reduced from 100% to 93%, a 7% reduction. That's all, barely noticeable. The coins look identical. They bear the same imperial seal, the same profile of the emperor, but something fundamental has changed. The minter understands what this means. The treasury is empty. The wars in Britannia and Parthia have consumed everything. The great fire that burned half of Rome needs rebuilding. The emperor needs money the empire doesn't have. So they're creating it. Not from production, not from conquest, from debasement. This is the first stage of the pattern. Here's how the mathematics work, and this is crucial to understand because this same mathematical certainty is operating in our system right now. When you reduce the silver content by 7% but keep calling it the same coin, you can produce 7% more coins from the same amount of silver. Instant monetary expansion. The treasury is flush again. The bills get paid. The crisis passes. But here's the trap. Prices don't stay static. They can't. Merchants aren't stupid. The bread baker in the forum notices that the coins feel lighter when he weighs his day's takings. The wine merchant tests them. The olive oil trader from Carthage refuses to accept them at face value. Prices begin to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. So the empire debases again. 93% silver becomes 90%, then 85%, then 80%. By 193 AD, just 130 years later, the denarius contains 50% silver. By 265 AD, it's down to 5%. The coin that built an empire is now a copper slug with a silver wash so thin you can rub it off with your thumb. This is the second stage. The cascade cannot be stopped. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. It's not a failure of willpower. It's not corruption, though there was plenty of that. It's mathematics. Cold, inescapable mathematics. Once you start, you can't stop. Because stopping means admitting the currency is worthless. It means price collapse. It means social upheaval. It means the soldiers don't get paid. It means the end of political power. So every emperor continues the debasement, every single one, because the alternative is immediate collapse, while debasement promises one more year, one more campaign, one more attempt to restore the glory. Now watch this same pattern emerge in a completely different context. Medieval France, 1306, King Philip IV faces a crisis. He's fighting wars on 3 fronts. He's built a massive bureaucratic state. He needs money. The kingdom's coffers are empty, but Philip is clever. He's learned from history, or so he thinks. Instead of debasing the coinage directly, he targets an institution. The Knights Templar, they're bankers to kings. They hold vast reserves of gold and silver. They're creditors to the crown, and they're vulnerable because they're not French nobles. They're an international religious order. On Friday, October 13, 1307, Philip orders the simultaneous arrest of every Templar in France. Hundreds of knights are seized in a single morning. Their treasure is confiscated. Their debts to the crown are cancelled. It's brilliant. It's ruthless. It solves the immediate crisis, and it sets in motion the exact same pattern. Because here's what Philip doesn't realize. Trust is the foundation of money. The Templars weren't just holding gold, they were the backbone of medieval European finance. They moved money across borders. They provided credit. They were the banking system. When Philip destroys them, he doesn't just seize their assets. He destroys the financial infrastructure of Europe. Within 2 years, credit markets freeze. Merchants can't get loans. Trade slows. Prices become volatile. Other kings, watching Philip, begin their own currency manipulations and confiscations. The stable monetary system that had been building for 2 centuries collapses. This is the third stage, the trust cascade. When you violate the fundamental rules of the monetary system, whether through debasement, confiscation, or default, you destroy something that takes generations to rebuild. Trust. And without trust, money becomes just metal again. Just paper. Just numbers on a screen. Let's accelerate through time. Watch how the pattern repeats, but faster each time. Weimar Germany, 1923. You're a clerk in a Berlin printing office, you work for the Reichsbank. Your job is simple, print money. You arrive at work in the morning. The mark is trading at 4.2 trillion to the dollar. By evening, when you go home, it's at 6 trillion. Not because anything real changed in the German economy, not because of production shifts or trade imbalances, because the printing presses are running 24 hours a day. The government needs money to pay war reparations, to pay civil servants, to avoid complete social collapse after the lost war, so they print and print and print. Here's a detail that makes this real. Workers are paid twice a day, not because employers are generous, but because the morning money becomes worthless by afternoon. People sprint from the payment office to the nearest store. Not walking, sprinting, because every minute of delay means their wages buy less bread. A loaf costs 250 marks in the morning, 400 by evening. This is the pattern at high speed. What took Rome 200 years happens in Germany in 18 months. Same mechanism, same mathematics, same ending. By November 1923, the mark stabilizes, but not through wisdom or careful policy, through complete collapse and replacement with a new currency backed by land and foreign loans. But here's the crucial point. This isn't ancient history. This is living memory. People who experienced this were still alive until recently, and the lessons were supposed to be learned. Now we arrive at 2025, at our moment, and I need you to see how the exact same pattern is operating, just with different aesthetics. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. The United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at the fixed rate of $35 per ounce. The dollar, the world's reserve currency, became what economists call fiat currency, currency by decree, by trust alone. This is presented as liberation, flexibility, modern monetary theory, the freedom to respond to crises without the constraints of metal. But look at what actually happened through the lens of the pattern. The U.S. could unmaintain the gold standard because the Vietnam War and Great Society programs required more spending than the economy was producing. The gold was flowing out to foreign central banks demanding conversion. The choice was clear: default on the gold commitment or end the programs and war. They chose debasement, not of silver content, but of the fundamental backing of the currency. And then the cascade began. The monetary base, the total amount of dollars in existence, has expanded by over 8,000% since 1971, not through production growth, through creation. Digital debasement. The pattern accelerates. In 2008, the Federal Reserve creates $1.3 trillion to bail out the banking system. In 2020, they create $4 trillion in response to COVID. In 2023, they inject hundreds of billions to prevent a banking crisis. Each time the response is the same: create more currency. Because the alternative, allowing the system to contract, allowing failures, allowing prices to reflect reality, is politically impossible. This is the second stage playing out in slow motion. The cascade that cannot be stopped. Now here's where it gets really dark. Pay attention to this part because it's not theory, it's mathematics. Every fiat currency in history has eventually failed. Every single one. The average lifespan is 27 years. Some last longer, some collapse faster, but the pattern is unbroken. Why? Because of what economists call temporal arbitrage, the ability of current political leaders to borrow from future populations who can't vote against them. A leader in 2025 can promise benefits and programs and spending that won't need to be paid for until 2040. By then, they're out of office. Someone else's problem. The incentive is always to spend more, promise more, create more currency. This isn't conspiracy, it's incentive structure, game theory. The tragedy of the commons applied to currency. And the mathematics are clear. When you can create currency without production constraints, you will. When you can defer costs to the future, you will. When you can buy short-term stability with long-term consequences. Political systems always make that trade. Every single time. Look at the current U.S. debt. $36 trillion, not billion. Trillion. That's more than the entire U.S. economy produces in a year. It's growing by another trillion every 100 days. Can this be repaid? Mathematically, no. Will it be repaid? No. So what happens? History provides 3 templates, only 3. And you need to understand that we're heading toward one of these regardless of policy, politics, or hope. Option 1. Hyperinflation. The Weimar route. The government continues to create currency to meet obligations until the currency loses all value. Prices explode. Savings are destroyed. Social order breaks down. Eventually, the currency is replaced entirely with something new. Option 2. Default. The Philip IV approach. The government simply declares it won't honor obligations. Debts are cancelled. Promises are broken. Creditors, both foreign and domestic, lose everything. Trust collapses. The financial system has to be rebuilt from scratch. Option 3. Slow debasement. The Roman path. The currency is gradually destroyed over decades through endless small debasements, each one justified as temporary, necessary, a response to crisis. The purchasing power slowly erodes until people's wages buy less each year. Savings become worthless. and the divide between those who own hard assets and those who hold currency becomes an unbridgeable chasm. Notice something. All three options end with the currency losing value. All three end with wealth destruction. All three end with social upheaval. The only difference is speed. Here's what historians will say about this era. Looking back from 2075 or 2100, they knew. The information was available. The historical pattern was clear. The mathematics were undeniable. But they continued anyway because the alternative required sacrifices that no political system could demand, and they'll be right. Because we are in the cascade now. We have been since 1971, maybe since 1933 when the US first left the gold standard domestically, maybe since 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created. The specific date doesn't matter. What matters is that the mechanism is operating, the pattern is playing out, and barring a complete transformation of how political systems handle currency, something that has never happened voluntarily in human history, the ending is predetermined. Not because of malice, not because of stupidity. Because of mathematics and incentive structures that are stronger than individual will. You might be wondering, when does it end? What's the timeline? And here's the terrible truth. No one knows. Rome took centuries. Weimar took months. The pattern operates at different speeds depending on variables we do unfully understand: global reserve currency status, military power, energy resources, technological advancement, social cohesion. But there's a signal to watch for. It's happened every single time before the final acceleration. It's when the government starts to criminalize alternatives. When Rome was debasing currency, they made it illegal to refuse imperial coins. When Philip needed to maintain his debasement, he destroyed the Templars who represented an alternative system. When Weimar needed to prevent capital flight, they implemented harsh controls. When Nixon closed the gold window, he simultaneously made it illegal for Americans to own gold. Watch for the moment when governments start restricting alternatives. When they begin treating cryptocurrency holders as criminals. When they implement central bank digital currencies with programmable restrictions. When they make it difficult to own physical assets. When they create financial stability regulations that prevent people from moving wealth outside the system. That's not the beginning of the pattern. That's the signal that we're entering the final stage. So here we are, 2025, the most powerful economic system in human history, the most sophisticated financial markets ever created, the most advanced technology, the most educated population, and we're running the exact same pattern that destroyed Rome, that collapsed medieval Europe, that devastated Germany, that has brought down every fiat currency ever created. The Roman minter holding those two coins, one weighing 3.9 grams, one weighing 3.7 grams. He knew. He understood that something fundamental had changed, that the empire had crossed a line, that the mathematics would eventually catch up with the debasement, but he had a family to feed. The emperor's guards were watching, and refusing orders meant death, so he kept minting the lighter coins. Just like we keep creating currency, keep expanding debt, keep deferring consequences. Not because we don't know, not because we don't understand the pattern, but because the system we've built doesn't allow for any other choice. The equation has been running for 54 years now, since we left gold. Every year, it progresses closer to its mathematical conclusion. Every crisis, we add more terms to the equation. Every solution, we make the eventual reckoning larger. And here's the final truth. You can't opt out of this pattern. You live in an economy, you earn currency, you pay in currency, you're part of the system, whether you choose to be or not. The only question is whether you understand which stage of the pattern we're in, and what you do with that knowledge. Because the Romans who saw it coming, some of them bought land, some bought gold, some learned multiple skills, some built networks outside the monetary system. They didn't stop the collapse, but they survived it. And on the other side, they built something new. The pattern is mathematical certainty. But your response to the pattern, that's still your choice? The weight of that silver coin in Rome changed by 7%. That's all it took to set in motion to centuries of decline. Look at your currency. Look at what's being created right now. Look at the debt. Look at the promises that can't be kept. And ask yourself, which stage are we in? Because the pattern always completes. Always. And understanding where you are in the cycle is the only edge history allows. The equation is running. The terms are being added. The solution is inevitable. The only variable left is time.